Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to have you today. My don't be deceived by my description here. Wesley McClogan is our CMO, and I'm happy to pinch hit for him today. But obviously, I'm not Wesley. My name's Katie Porter. I'm a content marketing manager for Marin One, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Very excited for what we have to present and some of the experts that we have lined up for you. We have a new Agdabola. So this is obviously budgeting strategies for 2023. We'll be going through some evergreen components and some best practices for this coming year as well, so that you can plan your budget as effectively as possible. We have Brett Conkey with us from Forrester, and then a new Agdabola is an account director for Marin. And both of them are incredible experts in their space. I've been learning a lot from them as we've been preparing for this webinar, so I'm really excited to have them both. I'll let them speak a little bit more about themselves as they go through the content we have today, but I will quickly go through the agenda as well. So how are we looking at budgeting for this coming year, right? How are we trying to finalize what the fiscal plan needs to be? And there's several considerations that we need to take as marketers as we go through that process. So first, Anu will go through some of the industry disruptors for marketers in this coming year, things that are kind of anticipated that might throw a wrench in the cog, so to speak. And then Brett will be going through the strategic budget allocation process, which is a methodology that he has really been working on for years and has streamlined and made really effective at any point of planning your marketing budgets. And then Anu will go through some of the more finite process of really understanding your audience and how to execute that strategic budget allocation process. So she'll be talking through the purchasing funnel research and optimization process, as well as options for automating your budgeting and analysis. So without further ado, I will pass the mic over to Anu.
Thank you very much, Katie. So yeah, as Katie said, we're going to start off with talking about some of the industry disruptors we've had, especially for the past couple of years. And if we go to this next graph there, we'll see the percentage of budgets that has been allocated towards marketing as a percentage of revenue has been dropping, especially since 2020, 2021. In the next few slides, you'll see as to no surprise why that has been. It has gone up a little bit, but as we can see, the trend over the past 5 years has totally dropped. Before joining Marin, I have done a lot of experiences with different agencies and done some in-house work. And I feel like, especially when I started going in-house, there was a big move of companies wanting to take control of their tactics, strategy and spend. So taking control of their paid search account, taking control of their display account, their email marketing, and hiring people in-house. But what we're actually starting to see more and more is those same people are starting to 58% of these CMOs are going, I need help, especially over the past couple of years of the disruptors that we've seen that have been very much unprecedented. And what are some of these unprecedented disruptors? On top level, we're talking new paid media channels, a post-COVID world. We've got two big C's to deal with now, if one wasn't bad enough. And then we've got the economic downturn that we've got. So going straight into this new paid media channels, what we're talking about the likes of TikTok. We're seeing that they're the most downloaded app of 2021, 656 million downloads. I'm always seeing, new dance moves and, cat videos and all of that. All those views skyrocketed. We know that. Snapchat as well, revenue, that will also increased. Surprisingly, I actually thought maybe TikTok has overshot Snapchat and Snapchat had no space, but they're still doing well in the world of, short video media, and they had an increased revenue of 63% in 2021 to $4.1 billion. And we also find that 4.3 million people are clicking on Instagram shopping ads every day. I see those ads all the time. I think to myself, how is anybody actually buying stuff through Instagram? But 4.3 million people are. So that is working now. That's loads of several new channels that all these brands, all these CMOs have to consider how do I become effective? How do I differentiate myself in these channels? We also have we had the era of COVID, 2019, 2020, all our, traveling plans kind of came to a screeching halt. But still many customers do still prefer that face-to-face interaction. So the people selling masks, their revenues, have skyrocketed. But there's also less trust in supply chain for buyers and sellers. And also customers are value dependability more than ever. People want, they're really relying on trust. They want to trust a brand. I don't feel like people don't really want to shop around anymore. They want to see that there's a brand that they trust and really stick with that. So if you can really prove your dependability with your customer, you're winning. And then going on to the third major economic downturn, major disruptor in terms of marketing budgets is the economic downturn. Economist Stephen Hanke has said that there is an 80% likelihood of an aggressive US recession in 2023. So not just a recession, aggressive. Bank of England predicts a significant recession in the UK, and there's a 1% economic decline month on month that has been happening in 2022 all through this year. So we're coming to the end of this. We're coming from some very reliable sources here. So these are really numbers that we really should be paying attention to. Also, we've seen that consumer behavior is more difficult to predict as there is the tightening of budget and, which creates a volatility and personal urgency. So in terms of what people think is important, what people think are luxury items, those kind of products are going in between those two areas. And due to inflation as well, prices have increased for so many things, whether it's we're talking gas, electricity, all the things that we do consider as our bare necessities, those are increasing. So many buyers are prioritizing the price, above the preferred brand. And going on to a very popular statement that has been said for many years now, and which is now even more important than ever. People always think to themselves, CMOs are always thinking, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. So right now, more than ever, it's about proving that each of your money is being spent well, and whatever you're spending your money, whatever channel you're spending your money on, it's bringing in that efficiency. And now I'm going to pass on to Brett that's going to talk more about how to be more strategic about that, and making sure that you're proving your efficiency through their tools.
Thanks, Anu.
No worries.
It's nice to speak with you all. As Katie said, I'm Brett Conkey. I'm a principal analyst at Forrester, focused on marketing operations strategies. Part of my role there is to help clients improve their marketing budgeting. As market conditions are changing, and we're facing the likelihood of disruptions like Anu's been describing, it becomes more important than ever that organizations are able to plan their spend around a more flexible strategy. The Forrester strategic budget allocation process is designed to improve over traditional budgeting in a bunch of ways. First, it focuses on making budgeting an aligned and integrated component of marketing planning. That helps to ensure that as much of the budget as possible is being aligned against the organization's top strategic priorities. Second, it's intended to streamline the budgeting process, and it's allowing you to make big decisions in a much shorter amount of time. Third, it's attempting to leverage the strengths of the marketing experts that exist inside the different levels of your organization to drive budgeting decisions within their areas of expertise. And then finally, we're trying to reduce or eliminate habitual spend. We force organizations to look at their spending choices with fresh eyes during both annual planning and ongoing performance reviews. Most of you will have heard of either top-down or bottom-up budgeting. Top-down budgeting refers to budget planning that begins at the leadership level, and then it gets handed down with budgets going to each part of the business. Bottom-up planning refers more to each area of the business building their own plan to achieve their goals, and then those bottom-up budgets are rolled up to produce a company budget that needs to be reconciled and approved. Neither of those methods is really ideal on their own. Top-down planning can too often be disconnected from the specific needs and experiences of the execution teams and geographic differences. It also tends to be a finance-driven exercise, and that can end up thinking more in terms of general ledger categories than in real business priorities. When it comes to bottom-up budgeting, the only thing we can be sure of in that kind of process is that the requested budgets are going to add up to significantly more money than we have, which means that the entire first pass can turn into a waste of time. As groups make their requests, they get told no, they try again, and debate priorities among competing groups. Forrester's process is designed to create a more artful balance between those two concepts. The initial phases are focused on top-down allocation of budget, aligning as much spend as possible against key strategic objectives. Companies begin by defining marketing objectives as part of a strong marketing planning process. They start with an estimate of the full marketing budget for the upcoming year, usually based on a percentage of the prior year. That allows them to get started early before budgets are final. The first allocation is just to carve out the budget necessary for personnel and other fixed costs. Then companies look at the variable program budget to understand how much needs to be set aside for out-of-campaign expenses, things like shared services contracts or large events that cross over lots of different parts of your customer base. You figure out how much goes to that, and then you can figure out how much can be left over to be allocated towards your big strategic initiatives. The goal is to free up as much of your variable budget as possible to drive those key initiatives, what Forrester calls campaigns. Hopefully about 70% of your variable spend can be driven into your campaigns. Then, the budgeting process moves on to detailed campaign design, allocating buckets of money against each major marketing initiative and sub-campaigns that are going to be pursued. Let's dive a little deeper into this top-down portion of the process before we look at the bottom-up steps. A key concept that kind of underpins strategic budget allocation is that you need to have an aligned set of performance objectives at every level of the marketing organization. Each level of campaign planning, as well as each region, business unit, functional team, should have a clearly defined set of goals for the coming fiscal year that are created during marketing planning. Some of those goals are going to be specific to that business area in question, but at least a few of the key metrics, such as revenue, should ladder up throughout the hierarchy. In order to articulate those aligned objectives, you need to adopt a marketing measurement framework that encompasses the various levels of campaign planning as well as your specific org design, things such as your business units or regional teams. Your hierarchy is going to end up varying based on your business. Some of that plan, it may be overarching campaigns that go across all parts of the business, but others may start at the business unit or geography or industry segment level and produce campaigns inside each of those. Once you've decided on your hierarchy, you'll use that same structure for planning, for budgeting, and for measurement. That helps you align the metrics to spend at every level. The key concept to take away from this piece is that every dollar assigned in the budgeting process should have a corresponding purpose, and your organization should have a plan in place to measure whether that objective is being met. And that's an area where having a strong platform in place helps you track campaign and budget execution can make a huge difference. When Forrester works with clients to build the planning and measurement framework, we focus on campaign planning to drive a customer-first strategy for your business. This means that campaign strategy starts from buyer needs. I think it's probably important for me to pause at this point and clarify for a moment what Forrester means when we use the term campaign. In our terminology, a campaign includes all the planned marketing activity that's focused on a defined target market to address a specific buyer need. On this slide, you can see a visualization around how a combination of target market and buyer need can come together to create what we think of as an overarching campaign. Here we see 3 campaigns growing out of the needs of this market, each with a slightly different theme that speaks to its particular audience. Once the overarching campaign themes have been defined, we would expect that that campaign is going to continue to run for at least a year or more. Here's a simplified illustration of a Forrester campaign planning framework. It starts with the high-level campaign, as I've described. Most companies will only have 4 or 5 campaigns in a given year. Underneath the campaign level, we describe 4 program families. They include reputation or brand marketing, demand marketing, internal enablement such as sales enablement, and then customer engagement programs, which usually focus on things like loyalty and advocacy. Inside each program family, marketing execution teams will design programs, which are collections of coordinated tactics built to achieve a specific program goal. Those tactics are what most of the industry refer to as campaigns. So tactics are the campaigns that you would build and execute inside Marin One or in most CRM or marketing automation platforms. So in this example on the screen, you can see that we have defined 3 demand programs with goals that focus on different points of the buyer's journey. We're looking at lead generation, nurturing, and pipeline acceleration, or what at Forrester we would call activation, validation, and acceleration. In the top-down portion of the Forrester budgeting process, marketing leadership is going to set initial guidance for what percentage of the marketing program budget should be dedicated to each major campaign. And then they make strategic choices about how that should be split between reputation, demand, engagement, and enablement. And that suggested program family split is one of the key decisions that need to be validated by execution teams in the bottom-up portion of the process. For the remainder of my slides, I'm going to be focused on that bottom-up portion, where marketing execution teams are receiving both their objectives and their campaign-level budget allocation, and it's time for them to turn that into real marketing plans. I'll walk quickly through each of the 5 steps that are on the screen here from the perspective of the manager of a marketing execution team. That could be an industry or BU-focused leader, or it could be leader of a geography. So in the process, budget arrives at the level of the execution team with strings already attached. Ideally, each element of the spend has a measurable purpose. Leadership has allocated the money there for a reason, and it's been clear about the expected results. So the first step for a marketing execution leader is to make sure that they are clear on both the allocated budget they've received and the associated goals that they're tied to. They need to be able to communicate both of these clearly to their teams. And they also need to be able to provide feedback back to leadership as soon as possible if they identify areas where the allocated budget doesn't seem to realistically align to their goals. The second step involves looking at leadership's expectations for the program family spend inside each campaign. For example, you might have budgets where you've allocated a particular campaign with guidance to dedicate 25% of the spend to reputation and brand, and 60% to demand activities, and so on. Marketing execution leaders should be the ones with the clearest understanding of the needs within their particular area of focus, whether that's an industry vertical or business unit, product line, geography. They should be able to customize those percentages as needed and communicate that back to leadership to make sure they stay in alignment. Next, the hard work begins, the hardest part, which is execution teams leveraging their specific expertise to turn that bucket of money that was allocated to them inside each campaign into a program strategy and an execution timeline that they believe can hit the objectives they've been given. So at Forrester, we help our clients with the marketing program planning framework. That's something that companies use to build a strategy that ensures that each marketing tactic executed is being done as part of an aligned program, working together to achieve a measurable goal. The outcome of the process is highly customized inside each target segment that you're driving prospects and customers through in your buyer's journey. There's 2 key points that I'd like to call out regarding program development. First is the 70-20-10 rule. Now, this is best practice advice you'll see throughout the industry, and you've likely heard it before. And it holds up really well in budget planning, trying to drive the efficiency of your spend. In this context, it refers really to 2 things: the riskiness of the effort and the amount of customization that's going to be required. About 70% of your marketing plan should be proven and tested methods that you're almost certain are going to help you with your objectives. And importantly, that can be reused across your business with little customization required. About 20% should be newer methods or ideas that seem promising but require some customization to your particular target market. Ideally, only about 10% of your marketing should be focused on tactics that are completely untried or that require extensive customization with little opportunity to reuse. The second point I'd like to call out is the need inside any budget planning framework for a clear feedback loop with leadership. In Forrester's process, it's this program design step where execution leaders will need to identify any final gaps that may exist between the expected performance and the proposed budget. They need to be able to communicate a clear business case back to leadership of why either the allocated budget or the assigned goal, one or the other, will need to be modified. Step 4 involves translating that program strategy into an actual tactic or campaign calendar, identifying specific activities and their associated spend. Forrester clients will typically build out detailed plans for the first, possibly the second quarter of the coming year. Beyond that, they'll most often allocate money towards program level goals, but they wait to define the specific tactics underneath each program until they get a little closer to execution. And that's mainly for two reasons. First, because they want to be able to evaluate the performance of tactics in flight to better understand what's working, what's not. That lets them do a better job on future planning. But secondly, it's because we also encourage them to re-evaluate their decisions for budget allocations on an ongoing basis, recognizing that shifting budgets away from areas that are underperforming may be best for the business overall. And then that final step 5 for our execution teams in the budgeting process is to roll up, validate, and communicate their tactical spending plans to their leadership team in finance. And this is a chance to ensure that that planned spend for each major campaign still falls in line with leadership guidance after all the details have been hashed out, and that the expected breakdown between reputation, demand, engagement, enablement has still been maintained throughout that planning process. Then as execution begins, teams start to be able to report results against each of those areas of spend to identify whether the different components of their budget are on pace to achieve the goals they were paired with. So now in this process, I've talked a lot about the perspective of marketing leadership and the execution team leaders. I'd like to hand it back to you, Anu, for more perspective about the challenges that face marketers who execute these programs.
Anu, is your volume on? I wonder if you might be muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because obviously I'm doing this from home. This will happen 1,000,001 times. It's one of those bingo cards on webinars, isn't it? Like, am I on mute? Anyway, back to the webinar. Sorry, everyone. So yeah, we are now going to go to the section of talking about, how marketers now need to address these 2023 challenges. We've talked about what's been happening over the past couple of years. Brett has given us a few, tools and, ways to really approach this. So, but how do we really address it? How do we really do this budget planning? And we're going to be talking first about the purchasing funnel and the importance of researching and optimizing and how we need to do things a little bit differently, even if it's for the short term. Right now, the key thing, if you do not listen to the next 10 minutes of me talk, please take this one thing away. Get to know what your customer wants. That is really the crux of all we're going to talk about in the next about 4 or 5 slides. But let's get into that. So the next slide is going to be talking about the importance of us needing to focus on the market. Once you're someone who is in marketing, whether you like it or not, you do not know what your customer wants. I do not care whether it's that your mom or your sister or your brother fits that, the buyer target and they're the kind of person that will buy your product. You cannot use that information to decide what you're going to do for a brand if you're trying to go mass market. So really, research is important. Everybody wants to be heard, but no one really wants to be studied. So think, outside the surveys, you need to use tools that can help you gather insights about the brand reputation, what people actually think about what the brand's value is. Your customers do feel that you're a company that is diverse? Do they feel that you're a company that actually is concerned about their economic needs, their economic situation, or the fact that they're not necessarily a home of 2 kids or they're a single person? Like those little nuances and how you can really communicate those kind of ways of showing that you care about your customers is going to be really important. And tools that can help you do this are the likes of Brandwatch, Social Blade, Meltwater, and even Google Alerts and Google Trends, just keeping track of some certain searches or that people are doing on your brand terms or the types of products that are really important for you. And then we go on to the next slide. You then see that, the research results now can help you inform your decisions as to what to do in terms of good economy. And in times of recession economy, it will actually tell you what you need to be focusing on. In terms of the good economy, you'll have some competitors. But in a recession economy, there are different kind of competitors, because there'll be some people who decide that because the volumes are not that high, they might decide to pull out of it. And in the communities that I actually talk with, especially on Twitter, we always talk on the factor of when you have times of recession, when you have times of low volume, some brands might decide that they're not going to, some brands are going to decide that they're not going to do any activity or promote anything during that time. And that could be your time, and that could be your opportunity to actually steal some market share. So in doing that analysis of what your efforts are going to be, how you actually work during the good economic times and recession economic times is very important, and is going to be very different from each other. And then going on to the next slide, and these kind of things, and especially talking about deciding what you're going to do when some brands have decided they're not going to work during this time. This is the times where, investing in creative excellence is really important. The number one example that came to mind when I was going through this slide was the likes of Dove. They do shower gel, they do bathing products, but during the times of recession, they've really, especially in recent times, have really focused on body positivity, as in it's all that their creams and their shower gel is for any kind of skin type, no matter what kind of maybe medical issues that you may have. They've decided to really focus on the fact that they really care about the health of skin, no matter what size you are, no matter what skin color you have. If they've really pushed on that, we really help the diversity side of things in terms of our product. One would think, of course, everyone uses a shower gel. What's the importance of actually pushing diversity? But they've done it really well, and they've had seen increase in revenue because of those kind of things. So focusing on differentiating your message and doing things a little bit more innovatively is actually going to be really important, and it's going to definitely then shorten and reduce that depth of the downturn for yourself specifically, and your recovery once you get the recession period starts coming into space of growth. Your recovery of that will be a lot quicker. You'll bounce back a lot better than the competitors who decided not to do anything. And so next on, we'll talk about, what the importance is also about maximizing the volume, still while bringing efficiency, because during the times where there's going to be economic downturn, you actually really need to prove that you are bringing in that return on investment. You are giving a good cost per acquisition, all these important efficiency metrics. It's not just about the volume. It's not about just pushing things. It's really about showing that there's a good return. First of all, the important things about cutting wasteful marketing investments, so things like promotional items, publication partnerships, sales assets that customers don't really care about. Again, going back to what I said, if you do not take anything away, take this away. Knowing what the customer wants. Does a customer want a nice new stress ball with your brand name on it, or do they actually want a product that is actually going to face their needs? Do they actually want a product that is actually going to make them care, make them feel like you care about what's important to them? Next one down is about committing to the customer first strategy. So focusing on personalization. It's not one message fits all. You really need to dig into those research data that you've picked out. What's important to them. Personalization, resolving crisis quickly. My favorite personal example recently, in fact, was of my dad, who's with Lloyds TSB Bank, and there had been some issues with some people trying to commit fraud. He called them on a Monday. It took 3 hours for him to get this thing resolved. And I was like, Dad, you know what? People do not like Mondays. Whether they know they're supposed to be customer service or not, they don't like Mondays. Call them on a Wednesday. Call them first in the morning before they've hit the big volume of callers. He called them on a Wednesday morning. Someone sorted him out within an hour. My dad went from maybe I'm going to come all the way to London and quit Lloyds to, oh my God, that was the best service I ever have. I love Lloyds. I'm going to stick with them. And, those kind of things, those kind of issues, because exactly, especially when you have your customers from all over the world, if you're a global brand, you don't know where your customers are calling from. The importance of being able to resolve things quickly, resolving crisis quickly, makes them a more loyal customer. So, it's having that excellent customer service from everybody, from the CEO and the CMO, right up until that first person that someone is gonna pick up and listen and hear when they have an issue. Being able to pass them on to the right people instead of going through a string of 10 different people who don't necessarily care about your problem. So customer first strategy is really, really important. And then going on to the third point is all about experimenting in brand messaging. As Brett said earlier on, one of the slides that really stuck out to me is about when you do your budget, the 70-20-10 split, that 10% of being a little bit risky, of doing something that no other brand is doing different initiatives. That's where you take your risky budgets and actually test things out and really testing the environment and the temperature of your customers. So experimenting in brand messaging and creativity in terms of things like charitable initiatives, using user-generated content and influencer marketing, using interactive stuff and collaborative campaigns. Do something that the community, the people feel that they're actually part of, meaning that they'll want to stay with you even more. So, and then we're now going to go to like 3 common mistakes, which shouldn't be any surprising because it's going to really be talking about what we do with the customers that we can do better. So the first common mistake that that you really need to try to not get trapped in is the over investing in tried and true methods. Again, that split of 70-20-10. Don't just be like, I'm just going to do the same thing because it's worked over and over. We have gone through 3, as I've mentioned earlier on at this talk, 3 drastic changes that have happened. You need to do things differently. We don't have the same problems. So you cannot decide that you're going to use the same solutions that you've used before because you have brand new problems. So please do not go doing those tried and tested methods. Do things differently. Continue to test those new channels. Don't just sit in them and think that that's the thing that will work. Test it. If it works, continue it. If it's not working, pull out. And then going on to our second one, leaving data issues unresolved. And what's really important is removing any inconsistencies in your data analytics. Or your data test right from the beginning, when this problem is quite small, when it seems a little bit too easy, don't just brush it aside thinking you'll wait till it gets bigger. Sort it out when it's small so that it can be easily fixed and you can get onto doing the more interesting parts of the tasks. And then also reusing last year's budget without going through a refresh ROI analysis exercise. It's not even about reusing last year's budget. It's about even reusing last quarter's budget. By the time you've reached October, you should have reviewed what your budget looked like in July latest. You should have been looking at that by July. You should have really looked at what the budget has been based on what you predicted, what you forecasted, and then you should have a new idea, a new perspective of what October should look like compared to when you were looking at October's figures in January. So making sure you're on top of where the different sides of the budget is supposed to be right through the year is very important. And now we are now going to come up to the headliner topic, our budget optimizer, which is our solution to help you sort all these things out, making sure that you're looking at your budget all through the year, trying and testing new things, and making sure you're putting your customer first. So as someone, we put this slide, I think that our marketing team really had me in mind when we put this slide together, talking about PPC budget, because that's my bread and butter. That's what I've been doing for 12 years, and that's what I'm always thinking. And paid search budget is very, very much a channel where we're held accountable. We're being told that every budget we spend, we really do need to prove each pound that we've spent and making sure we're showing a return. So even tying things back to what we talked about right at the beginning of this webinar, is your PPC budget aligned with the purchasing funnel, with what the CMO is expecting for you to have returned in your budget? So it's all about not just paid search, but also like the email channels, the programmatic, all the different channels. Are you on pace to hit your budget? Do you understand the impact of your budget changes? If you make a change, are you affecting different brands, all the different campaigns, or other different channels? Do you ever wish the shared budgets worked across accounts and channels, different channels, especially for those who are in paid search as well? If you know about shared budget, Google Ads brought that in a while ago, being able to have one budget across different campaigns. how about if you can have one budget across different channels, so not just Google ads, but also maybe Facebook, also Instagram and Twitter ads. And then does budgeting take too much of your time? Budgeting is a really important task. No matter how much our roles in paid search has evolved, budgeting is one role that has stayed consistent. And as well, do you need flexible budgeting and allocation rules? But before we even get into how we're going to do that, planning is very important. Planning that, understanding your return at different levels of investment, forecasting conversions and how that evolves over time. Allocating your budget based on your roles and your priorities, and also knowing how that it will evolve. Budget Optimizer will help build the right plan across these different campaigns, knowing what your goals needs to be. The famous phrase comes into mind: garbage in, garbage out. If you do not give it the right data to work in, with the right targets to work in, you are never going to know whether you're looking at a successful or unsuccessful campaign. That is very important. So how does the Budget Optimizer work? It helps. What we try to do is we map the campaigns to one or more strategies, set a spend goal for each of the strategy that you have. It can be anything, whether it's a product level strategy or marketing level strategy or time-based level strategy. We set a spend goal for the strategy, and the users can apply constraints that limit the frequency or the dollar amount of budget changes. So you might want changes to happen every few hours or maybe every few days. Those kind of changes, you have control over that. You have a preview mode that will recommend the budgets with email notifications before things actually get implemented, and then the traffic mode that automatically then sends the budgets to the channels like Google and Bing. And what are the key capabilities of Budget Optimizers? What we try to do is organize the multiple budgets at once to support the different funnel stages or lines of business, allocate percentage of budget to specific campaigns. We set an impression share goal on priority campaigns and allocate remaining budget. We visualize performance versus plan with easy to read pacing dashboards. We automate alerting for campaigns that are not hitting their targets, and it has sophisticated temporal modeling to adjust for seasonality, so days of week, month, and year, in different ways. So if your different variations are like January to March and then onwards, you can have it that way. Or if it's more like a February to April kind of thing and onwards, then that way you can show that and indicate that in terms of how you look at seasonality. And on that note, that brings us to the end of this, my part of this, and I'm going to take it back to Katie I think she's got some questions for us.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Anu. Yeah, I know it's really helpful for me to get understanding from experts like you guys and to be able to see both kind of the whole process, right? How do we analyze budgets? What's some best practices for just planning overall? And then how do we execute for this coming year? So I'm glad that we really went through the whole process. There was a lot of content here, so hopefully everyone in attendance got something out of it. There were a few questions that came up in the chat. If you have any others, go ahead and pop them in now as well. But first I'll start with Brett. What are the most common roadblocks organizations face when they're going through the strategic budget allocation process?
Sure. I would say that there's a couple big ones. The first is that in order to align budget against your strategy, you have to go through a pretty rigorous marketing planning process. You have to understand not only what your big initiatives are, but their relative importance, and be able to not just say we have this big goal we need to achieve, but have some insight into how the different parts of the marketing organization are going to need to contribute to hit that goal. So that planning process has to be robust, or it's not really possible to be that strategic with the budgeting. The other part of it, and this is probably the biggest one, as our clients move to this type of model, is overcoming the inertia of the habitual spend. It's a very uncomfortable feeling for people in the organization to say, I had this much money last year, so this year I should have that much plus 5% or minus 5%. But you're not guaranteed that budget is going to be the same, because priorities might change. So the amount of budget that's allocated to your part of the business might change. An example that came up when the pandemic hit there were organizations that would put a budget against like a live events team. And the one thing you know then is that everything they spend is going to be on live events, whether that makes sense anymore for the business or not. So they have to pull budgets back. That's a really uncomfortable feeling. But as part of this process, that becomes the standard. What you had last year does not predict what you're going to have next year. Your strategic priorities do. And then as you're watching your results throughout the year, has to be an understanding that, future budget is not promised. If there's better opportunities for the organization, that budget might get shifted as we move along. I think those are the toughest things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think this other question is actually really related to that. So I'll jump to it real quick, Brett. This person said, there are many stakeholders in my organization and finalizing budgets takes a long time. How can I diplomatically and effectively keep things moving?
Yeah, it's so I tend to, and it's partly my bias working with the marketing operations strategy, but we feel like operations teams need to have a role as facilitators in this process. So one of the things that happens is that when we hit the point of having to make some tough decisions, we don't always have the cadences built out to get the right people in the room to make those decisions in a comprehensive time. We also have a role that operations can play in providing resources. So people need to choose what their priorities are. They need to have insights to do that. So the people who are able to, bring in the data that's necessary to make the decisions and make the strategic choices. And I think I just saw a question pop up, so I'm going to kill two birds with one stone because it was asking what's the average time for someone to properly invest in that process. So I think it's part of the same answer. I'll go on to that and say 1 to 2 months. Yeah, what we're trying to do is decrease that time by having some standardized structures in place, and over time companies get better and more efficient at it. Typically, it is still difficult to get it inside of 1 month. It's going to stretch a little bit longer than that. We try to get people to do it first, particularly the budgeting portion, with an estimate of what they think the budget's going to be. That's what I was talking about. Maybe it's 107%, or maybe next year it's 92% of what the previous bucket was, and you make your allocations based on percentages of that full pool. But then when reality hits and you know what your final budget is, you have to go back and adjust the numbers accordingly, up or down, when that big number changed. So yeah, a couple of months is where people usually fall.
Anu, I think this question would be best for you. Are there any disadvantages of automating budget processes in marketing?
I wouldn't necessarily call them disadvantages, but I would say there are some things that people forget to do, and they assume what automation would be when it comes to budgeting, and even just in general, when it comes to anything in terms of doing marketing. Like, there can be a bit of people thinking automation is so robust and it will do everything you need it to do, and all you have to do is set it and leave it to do your budgeting, and then you come back to it 3 months later and you're like, oh my God, everything went wrong. Why? Automation doesn't work. And it's not that automation doesn't work, it's because automation is still in quite an early stages of working. It's still, they're human beings behind it that have created these automation tools. And so obviously there will be things that might break every once in a while. So it's very much that you very much are attentive to what it's doing and making sure it is meeting the goals and the targets that you have set it. So yeah, I feel sometimes there can be a little bit of a fear to test, because people either think it'll work or it won't work, when it's actually, you really need to keep teaching it. It's like in line with like machine learning. These things are learning, they're evolving, the better, the more time is going on. So once you start working with things, working with this automation like tools for months and years, it will do a lot for you, a lot better than in the first few months. You're not really going to see, it's making amazing solutions for you in the beginning, but once you do, the longer you work with it, the longer that it knows your product and knows your business model, it knows your seasonality, that kind of thing. You cannot expect it to know about seasonality within a years of data. It needs to have been working for a few years for it to really understand seasonality. So I don't think necessarily people give it enough patience, give it enough attentiveness, and can really just put in a kind of a white or black box, and it's not that. You really need to, work with it and see how it's evolving for it to do better for you in the long run.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much, Anu. I believe we're just 1 minute past time, so just about perfect here. We want to be respectful of everyone's time here, so I think we'll go ahead and end it there. If there are any questions that we missed in the chat, we'll get back to you individually via email, or you're welcome to message us afterward, right? Just hop onto marinsoftware.com and send us a message, and we'd be happy to get you connected to answer any other budgeting questions that we can. And hopefully you gain something out of this, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, everyone.